Hey guys, today I want to talk about how to keep your feet warm. So we've got some cooler weather approaching, and a big thing that a lot of people come in here looking for is insulated footwear. And the reason they're looking for that is because they want to have warm feet when those temperatures drop. Now, it seems pretty intuitive, just put on some warmer shoes and your feet will stay warmer, but that's not really how it works. Having warm feet is about actually the whole system, what you're wearing up top, what kind of socks you're wearing, several other factors. So the first thing I want to talk about is how you layer on your legs and your upper body. Because if we're not keeping our core warm, if we're not keeping all those internal organs warm, what your body's going to do is say, hey, I don't need to send circulation down to my feet, down to my hands. I got to focus and prioritize on keeping my core, keeping those internal organs working. So if we're not making that part of our body comfortable and warm, it doesn't matter how much insulation you have in your shoes, they're going to be ineffective. So right here what I've got is a synthetic base layer setup from Timberland Pro. The important key thing here is that this is not made of cotton. This is synthetic. You could also have something that's made of wool, but what we want is something that as your body perspires, it's going to wick that moisture away and it's going to maintain the insulating properties even if it gets a little bit damp. Cotton will not do that. There's expressions, cotton is rotten, cotton kills, and when it comes to base layers, when it comes to your socks too, you want to absolutely stay away from cotton. So the foundation is having a good base layer that's going to manage moisture well. Beyond that, what you wear, whether you wear like a mid layer, like a fleece, a vest, whatever you put on your outer layer, something to go over that, whether it's just a waterproof parka or if it's really cold, something insulated in addition to your mid layer. That's up to you. That depends on the temperatures. But you need to start building that layering system. If you think you're just going to go out there and throw on, your regular pants and shirt, and then put on some really warm boots, and like maybe a cotton hoodie, you're setting yourself up for failure when it comes to keeping your feet warm and probably keeping the rest of your body warm too. So we talked about the base layer. Socks is going to be the next most important thing. These two socks here, in my right hand, we got one from Smart Wool, in the left, one is from Darn Tough. These are both merino wool socks. They both are designed to fit the same size foot. So like this will fit me like a size 11, but you can see one's a lot beefier. So there's a lot more wool in this one. It's important that your shoes fit that sock, and which we'll get to that in a little bit. But what I want to talk about here is the key thing. These both are made with merino wool. There's no better material that you can use for your socks than merino wool. That goes for whether you're just in 90-degree heat or below -20 below. This material, merino wool, does not itch, so it's really soft. It doesn't have that scratchy wool feeling that you may think of when you think of your grandma's wool sweater. It's super soft. It's going to prevent blisters. It fights bacteria and odor. It wicks moisture, and the natural properties of that wool fiber will insulate you even when they get damp. And make no mistake about it, if you put shoes on, your feet will perspire. It doesn't matter how warm or cold out it is. So it's really important, that moisture managing property of merino wool. If there's one thing that I can't stress enough in this whole spiel on keeping your feet warm, the right socks, merino wool socks. So we talked about the socks. The next thing I want to talk about is your boots. There's different levels of insulation. Right here on the right, or on my right, we've got a work boot that has 800 grams of Thinsulate insulation. Right here we've got a winter hiking boot that has 200 grams of Thinsulate insulation. And right here we've got another hiking boot that has 0 insulation. If I'm going out and I'm going on a hike, maybe I'm going a couple miles, I'm going up a mountain or something, or doing some elevation, something where I'm going to be active. It could be 15 degrees out. I'm going to wear this non-insulated boot every single time. The reason is my body, my internal engine is going to generate enough heat to keep my feet warm. If I wear something like this, even though it's freezing cold out, my feet are just gonna sweat like crazy. I'm gonna be uncomfortable, and worse, if I do slow down a little bit, they're gonna get cold. Even though wool can insulate with moisture, it's still gonna be a little less effective than if your feet are drier. So why would I choose something in between, like this 200 gram insulated boot or this 800 gram? Well, it really depends. If I'm doing something very stationary, let's say I'm gonna be standing outside for a prolonged period of time. I'm not shoveling snow or anything. Maybe I'm on a job site and I'm not gonna be running around a lot. There could be a couple hours where I'm just gonna be standing still or not moving too much. I might want this really heavy boot. That insulation is gonna keep that warmth trapped in there for longer when my body's not generating warmth. This one here is a little bit lighter weight insulation. Maybe if I was going snowshoeing or doing some light activity in very cold temperatures, I might use that. This particular boot from Solomon actually has some temperature ratings on it. And I always warn people, be very weary of those temperature ratings, because that's designed with maybe a certain activity in mind or a certain use case in mind. So this boot here says it's good down to a comfort range of 28 degrees Fahrenheit. I can tell you right now, if I was to go sit in a tree stand, say like hunting, or if I was to go stand on a job site for a long period of time, this boot would be too cold at 32 degrees for me. Conversely, if I was going on doing something very active, let's say I was shoveling snow or going on a hike, my feet might be almost too warm in something like this. So again, what insulation is right for you, or any at all, really depends on what you're doing in the shoe. So keep that in mind. Don't over insulate, because it's just going to make your feet too hot and too sweaty. I'd much rather see you just get the boot fit properly so that you can accommodate an appropriate weight sock. Maybe you can wear something a little bit heavier or a little bit lighter depending on what you're doing, if you want kind of that all-around functionality. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how the boots should fit. So fitting your boots for cold weather use. The number one thing that I see people do incorrectly with cold weather boots is make them fit too tight. It's actually a big problem that people do in general with hiking boots, work boots, etc. And the reason you don't want your boots to fit too tight with just a warm weather boot is because if you're doing activities in it, if you're in it all day, your feet will eventually swell and take up some of that room, and that's going to be very uncomfortable. In the winter, it's even more important, because you're not just talking about maybe having a hot spot on your feet, and what I mean by that is like an irritation area, but you're actually, by having the shoe fit too tight, you're compressing whatever insulation exists there. So even in an uninsulated shoe, you're going to be compressing the wool fibers, and they won't be as effective. In an insulated shoe, if it's fitting too tight, you're still going to be compressing whatever you're wearing for a sock. You're also potentially going to be compressing the insulation in there. So if you're trying to get a performance fit out of a heavily insulated shoe, you should be asking yourself, why do I need such a snug performance fit? Am I going to be really active? If that's the case, you may want to drop to a lower insulation level. Conversely, if you're getting your non-insulated shoes to fit super loose, so you can fit this plus another liner sock, if that's not what you're going to wear regularly with those, you might ask yourself, well, why do I want that heavy of a sock, a mountaineering level sock in my non-insulated shoe? Maybe I need something with a little bit of light insulation for what I'm going to do. So you really need to think about what kind of activity you're doing, what kind of performance you're expecting in your shoe, and why do you want the shoe to fit that way. Again, if you're trying for maximum warmth and you're going with a heavily insulated shoe and accommodating a heavy sock, you need that room so it traps the dead air space that insulates your foot. So we talked about fit. We talked about accommodating the sock in your shoe. The next thing I want to talk about is, let's say you're wearing a leather boot like this, or this one has some leather on it too, or even a fabric one like this. You need to treat the exterior of the boot with some kind of sealant. So all three of these boots are waterproof. What that means is they have a waterproof membrane. And that waterproof membrane is basically a liner that's inside of the boot that is impermeable. Water can't get in. It does allow vapor to escape. I can tell you right now that when you have that waterproof membrane and then some leather, plus you're wearing a heavy sock underneath, whatever interior layers there are, it's not going to be ever as breathable as a pair of trail running shoes or a sneaker. So with that in mind, you'll see some manufacturers recommend not to treat the leather on their boot with a sealant because they're going to say it makes it less breathable. I'm here to tell you that when it comes to winter conditions, cold conditions, you absolutely must treat the exterior of your shoe. You do not want water and snow to waterlog that material on the outside because that's going to sap heat away from your foot. And not only that, it's going to make the boots a little heavier and less comfortable as well. So you need to seal this. Common products would be a silicone sealer, Snow Seal, which is like a wax-based one. There's Nick Wax out there. There's mink oil. We sell a bunch of them. They're all good in certain applications. I wouldn't apply a wax or an oil to like a fabric and mesh shoe like this, but I absolutely would to these leather ones. This I would use a silicone spray to treat the material on the outside. But if you don't treat that exterior material, it's going to encourage snow and water to build up in that material, which is going to sap heat away from your body. It's going to reduce the insulating values that your combo of your sock and your boot are naturally giving you. So that's super critical and oftentimes overlooked. Make sure your shoes are cleaned and treated before you go out into those kind of environments. And you don't have to clean them and treat them every single time, but it's just a regular maintenance thing you need to do depending on how often you use your shoes. We do have another video about footwear care, and that goes over some of that. You can find that on our YouTube channel. So yeah, keep those shoes sealed and protected. So we talked about how you need to layer up top. We talked about what kind of socks to wear, treating the leather in your boots. One of the things I mentioned, but I want to go into more detail with, is your feet will sweat. It doesn't matter, what you're doing. The minute you put those boots on, your feet will begin to perspire. It doesn't mean that they're going to be dumping buckets, but it's going to happen. It's just a natural thing. Your feet can kick out a couple liters a day in certain situations of moisture. So if you're in a pair of insulated boots all day long, it's going to be really important at the end of the day, if you plan on wearing them the next day, to dry them out. So don't put your boots near a heat source. That can really damage the leather. I've seen situations where a boot just gets curled up like this and is stuck like that, from getting some water and some salt on it and then, drying next to a high heat source. What I like to do is pull the insole out of the shoe, stuff it with some newspaper, and that'll suck the moisture right out. In a pinch, you can use a hair dryer on low setting, so no heat, just to get air circulating if you need to do something real quick. But that's key. Get your boots dried out. Don't use heat. I just like to stuff some newspaper in them overnight. But anything that's just going to, suck moisture out or circulate air will help with that. One more thing you can do for moisture management is wear a liner sock. They were really popular years ago, but you'll still see them. I wear liner socks sometimes, and it's just a thin synthetic sock, nothing special. I don't think it is officially a liner sock. I think it's like a lightweight, synthetic or wool dress sock, but I just throw that on. Sometimes if I want to help manage moisture a little better, it'll absorb a little bit more of that moisture, wick a little bit more of it away from my foot. So that's one more thing you can do. One last thing that some people ask about is using toe warmers. I'm all for using toe warmers when it's extremely cold. I've found personally that for me, they work better if I stick them on top of my toe. So put your sock on first. Never attach one of those things directly to your foot. Always have your sock on. Make sure your boot has enough room for the toe warmer. And then I actually put it on top. And for me, that works better. I don't know the reason behind it, but my guess is that when it's under your toes, you have your body weight pressing down on it, and those things work by having some air activate the chemical in there to cause that heat reaction. So my hypothesis, if if you want to call it that, is that by standing on top of it, you're actually reducing some of the air that can keep that chemical working. So I like to stick them on top, and on top of that, it's a little bit more comfortable because you don't have this lump under your toes all the time. So just a tip if you're going to use those toe warmers. But in reality, for like 90% of cold weather applications, if you're layering correctly on your upper body, you're wearing the right socks, a pair of merino wool socks, your footwear fits correctly with the sock you're going to wear, and you're wearing the appropriate level of insulation for whatever you're doing, you're going to be fine. You probably won't need those. But you know, in certain situations you may want them, and that's how I use it. So I hope that kind of covers some of the basics of how to keep your feet warm. And remember, again, it starts up top, and make sure you wear the right socks. That's it. If you guys have any questions, come in and visit us here at CHAR, and appreciate you listening. Thanks.